Okay, everybody, the results are in on our penetration test. Just got some visual aids here to help explain what's going on. So normally when you see a broadhead test, what'll happen is when you shoot this arrow here, your velocity, we'll just say 251 feet per second, right? And as it leaves, it's traveling at a certain yardage. So I have it marked out here to 35 yards, and this is where you have your target, right? So this is where it goes from 251 feet per second to 0 when it hits your target. Well, what we're interested in is this line right here. What happens after it hits? So if you design your test like this graph, it doesn't tell us a whole lot about what's going on when it hits. So what I've done in this ultimate broadhead test is I've made it into more like this, where we can see where this broadhead goes from 251 feet per second. It hits this masonite, and within 3 or 4 feet it slows down and gives us a nice little curve, right? So in this curve, underneath this curve, the area of this curve is the value of our penetration. So normally when you would add area, right, you go length times width, right? Well, we have this nice little curve here, so it doesn't match, right? It's not symmetrical, so our normal area formula does not work. So what we have to do is we have to use calculus, right? And this is the way that works is we take a whole bunch of little sections in here and then add them together, because we know the area of a rectangle, right? So if you take a whole bunch of little rectangles, this idea is called a Riemann sum, also known as a definite integral. So if you take the definite integral of when it contacts to the point that it stops, it'll give us a value, and from that value we know our penetration. But there's also a lot more going on in this factor, right? We also have cutting diameter, we have mass and acceleration due to gravity, we have wind resistance. There's a lot of different factors to go into play on how this arrow is going to fly, how it's going to penetrate. So what I've done is I've taken all these into effect, calculated them down, and given each broadhead a number based on how far it penetrated versus the cutting diameter and the kinetic energy. So to calculate kinetic energy, we need, first of all, the mass, then we need the velocity. So each arrow, as they were shot on the previous test, was weighed and then shot and chronographed. Every arrow individually was. So that's why you see the fluctuation of velocities. You see anywhere from 244 feet per second to 253, 255. It's because these broadheads aren't all exactly 100 grains. So some of them weigh a little more, some of them weigh a little less, some have more wind resistance, some have less. So that's all part of this test, and it's all been factored in. So with that said, I've come up with this chart here, and this here is all of our broadheads. So starting with the fixed blades, number one on the top with the fixed blades was the Ramcat, the Smoke Ramcat, and with 79.37 joules of kinetic energy, it penetrated 1.125 inches of masonite, and to give us a penetration factor of 2.64. The higher this number is, the better the penetration factor is. So this in a fixed blade looks like a pretty awesome blade. Next we have the Wacom XL with a 2.06, then the Wacom Triton 1.95. Then we have the Muzzy MX3, pretty standard broadhead. A lot of people use those. I've used those with a 1.90. The Wasp Hammer with a 1.81. Wasp Bullet 1.80. Grim Reaper Hades with a 1.75. The Nap Hellraiser with a 1.70. Nap Thunderhead with a 1.69. G5 Montech 1.6. Then we have the 2 blades, and these were amazing how far they penetrated versus their cutting diameter. But it doesn't have, these don't have near the cutting surface as the rest of these will. So these penetration factors are based only off of cutting diameter. And later I'm going to figure out how to put in some cutting surface as well. But this blood runner, and that blood runner, the 2 blade, took everything with a 4.1 penetration factor. Then next was a Trophy Ridge Meat Seeker, the 2 blade. It had a 4.0, so not very far behind. If you're into the 2 blades, which I never have been, I don't really know why. Just kind of one of those things, everybody shoots their own broadheads. This is how it's always been, this is how we're going to use it. But definitely something to look at. You know, 4.0, 4.1, those are great numbers. Once we break it down into the durability, then we'll factor everything together and get one solid number for each broadhead, and then rank them that way. So next is the mechanicals. The mechanicals penetration factor starts with the Meat Seeker 3 blade 2-inch cutting diameter. It has a penetration factor of 3.56. One interesting thing to note about these mechanicals is the way the blades open up and what they do after they open up. So these Meat Seekers, when they hit, they didn't open up all the way on contact, but they opened up as they went through the boards, which is crazy to me, but obviously it did us some good. Then if you look at the Knapp Spitfire, that second board, it was completely open, but then it wasn't strong enough to take the force. So what happened is those blades bent backwards and we lost cutting diameter with this one. Which is exactly what happened with my Wasp jackhammer that I shot the elk with. It hit and it had a good entrance hole, but then once it hit, those blades folded all the way flat against that shaft because there's just too much force on those when they hit those bones, so they fold back. But these Meat Seekers, they pop through and then the blades open up backwards, so it gives you a bigger cutting diameter. The only problem is you don't get a big entrance hole. But once they lock and they go through the other side, if you do make a complete pass through, you're going to have a huge exit hole. So it's kind of a toss up. The bottom line is there's nothing that can replace a good shot. Well placed shot, you can kill it with a field point. So that's what breaks down into the accuracy test. So we had the Meat Seeker 3 blade 1.5 inch was next with 3.41. Knapp Spitfire 2.94, Trophy Ridge Steelhead 2.84, Knapp Blood Runner 3 blade 2.5, G5T3 2.43. Interesting on this design because it is a rearward deploying, so it opens up backwards, but the way it opens up, it did fully open on contact, and so you didn't quite get the penetration that you were looking for, but you did get a good solid hole. Grim Reaper Razor Tip 2.1. Then next we have the 4 blades. And to me these are the traditional, right? This Magnus Stinger Buzz Cut has 4 blades on it, so I put it in this category. The Muzzy Phantom also has 4, but these are the typical cut on contact, old school, what you picture your grandpa shooting. A lot of people still shoot, but it seems to me like it's old news, because this Wacom Exit is a 4 blade, which is huge because it has a ton of cutting surface, but the penetration factor is 1.82. Muzzy Phantom 1.4, Muzzy MX4 1.3, 6, and then the Magnus Stinger Buzz Cut was 1.3, and then your standard field point on our control test was a 1.0 penetration factor. So that just goes to show you how that cutting diameter is taken into account. So hopefully this is helpful on buying some broadheads or deciding to choose, you know, narrowing down which broadhead you're going to use in this particular hunt or in this particular situation. Obviously the ones that open frontwards You're not going to want to use those for elk because they can't take that impact when you hit that bone. It bends those blades all the way backwards. So if you are going to shoot a mechanical, you want to shoot one of the rearward deploying for elk. And interesting note about the meat seekers is that blade shape is a parabola. And in a parabola, it's a very strong structure. If you look at all the dams or a lot of the dams, they're parabolic in shape, and that's to support all that weight of water. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens when we get down into the durability factor of these broadheads. But hopefully this is helpful. Stay tuned, check it out. We're going to have some more tests coming up next week. We're going to run the 80-pound and the 40-pound test. This was with the 60-pound Evo. So next week coming at you will be the 80-pound and the 40-pound. So hang out and hopefully we'll figure some stuff out. Thanks, guys.